Today we continue our sustainable development goal and the resulting climate change. So last class we have studied this all climate change actions and sustainable development goal. So let's share my screen.
So the matter of satisfaction of achievement that India that in Rio outcome documents reforms equity and peaceful of among the Rio people. That means India also taking part in this Rio de Janeiro. That Rio 20 outcomes also did not lead any scientific or specific commitment on the finance and technology front. Because at that time the sustainable development goals are not in the force, so they are not thinking or not be compromising any finance or technology income. So the developed country are having obligation and responsibilities need to commit to provision of adequate public funds, including fund transfer, technology transfer, etc., capacity building. Because the poor country, the developing country, are did not have so much fund to think about climate, to think about the environment. But the responsibility of developing countries very much come to existence and they help to the other countries. Nevertheless, we hope that following of the process, Rio20 summit, both finance and technology will be issues living in the new strategy and the mechanism. So this is the circumstance and somehow it can be developed, it can be the baseline for develop the SDG in 2020 and the outcomes is SDG. The Rio 20 Summit outcome is developing the idea or brainstorming the idea about SDG in the baseline point of view. So this is very much important in the form of this is the first conferences regarding the environment and climate change, climate action, all these things, and the outcomes is SDG 17 SDG, which is clearly working towards sustainable development. That is also called a sustainable development goal. Then next is Convention on Biological Diversity. After that, global concerns of biodiversity also found an expression in Convention of Biological Diversity that is adopted in 1992. After this Rio de Janeiro summit, the biological diversity is come to reason because previously the importance of diversity is not posed from in post. In order to check the climate action or in order to check the climate change, in order to protect our environment, the biodiversity play an important role because all the animals, all the living beings that are present in a food chain or food web that is its own importance. There are several types of organisms they are playing their role in the food chain or food web. So the diversity is disturbed, then obviously the uh, environment is degraded and the ecosystem get depleted and become desertification, land degradation, all these things happen. So maintain the biodiversity is very much important in case in the indirectly as the to combat the climate change. So this convention of biological diversity comes into existence in order to having is important. So objective of these conventions are firstly conservation of biodiversity, that is the main theme of biological diversity convention, and second is sustainable use of its component. That means conservation is okay important, but what to do? We have to use the biodiversity or use the ecosystem resources, but in a sustainable way, and the fair and adequate sharing of the benefit arising from the genetic resources. That means when you are utilizing some plant or animals for our own sake, then we have to preserve these genetic resources not to extinct all the species and universally. So this is the main thing in biodiversity objective of the Convention of Biological Diversity, and it is also near universal membership of 193 countries. It having 193 country having membership, but in the United Nations it's 189. Laterally you can join and 193. So all countries of the United Nations they are the member of the Convention of Biological Diversity. So USA is the only major country that is not a party following the application of the CPT. So United States of America that is the country only that is not following these activities because he is having his own rule. And India also entered in Biological Diversity Act in 2002 and notified the rules in 2004 to give the effort to provision of CBD. Later, actually, India also joined in later 2002 and rules are found in 2004 because in convention CBD is happening in 1992. So whenever India also laterally joined in order to save the biodiversity conservation and utilization of natural resources in a sustainable way. So this is very much important to uh, combat the climate change. The biodiversity plays an important role for saving the ecosystem. Then the Prime Minister unveiled a communicative pylon on Hyderabad to mark COP11. That conference of 11, that is Rio Summit, there also our Prime Minister has opened in Hyderabad, they have opened a convention and having a suitable, in our own country, we are also discussing how to set up the goals according in line to this CBD or biological diversity, how to save the biological diversity in India. So it has been decided to establish diversified medium or museum garden on this site. That means we are setting different plants and saving plants animals so different by establishing a museum and a sea um, museum and seed museum, all these things and garden. So it has a play a role to show the international community that we are also preserving the biodiversity and we are also working to save the environment and combat the climate change. The national level, the effort will be made and strengthen implementation of Biological Diversity Act. So in our law, in our court also, we are enforced Biological Diversity Act. That means we cannot be hunting and poaching different types of animals, plants, cannot cut a tree randomly. So these are the laws and policies that can be acting in our nation internally in order to change, save the environment. So biodiversity, environment, ecosystem, whatever may be, and that is indirectly related to the climate change. So provide support also state biodiversity board and local people biodiversity register. The biodiversity convention conservation is done state level, national level, and local level. So all the things are involved, all the officials, all the people who are directly, indirectly related to this environment, they are involved, and the planning is going to be successful. And the Biodiversity Conservation Act, we are going to get incorporated in our state level, district level, and in our local level. And maintaining a biodiversity register, whatever may be the things we are note down. So that is a baseline that we give a provided data that we have working on this field. Next is called Doha Climate Change Conference in 2012. Next international forum or international conference that is meet in Doha in 2012 in order to combat the climate change or how to preserve the climate change, how to reduce the climate change, how to reduce the global warming, how to reduce the greenhouse effect, all these things. So Doha in 2012, the capital of Qatar, that is Doha, they have seat a conferences. They have jointly ventured to the different countries. So 26 November, this is the 18th session of BIDO conferences that is United Nations or that is set in December 8 December 2012 at the capital of Qatar. So there are different decisions should be made that is that should be implemented by this member of country. So let's club together is Doha Climate Gateway. This is also called as Doha Climate Gateway. This aim is to advancing the implementation of the UNFCCC and the Kyoto Protocol. So in order to change or in order to combat the climate change, we have to forcing and we have in this Doha climate change they are having agreement or they are having discussed the ways how they can working on this Kyoto Protocol and the implementation of the rules and policies. The Kyoto Protocol is nothing but how to reduce the greenhouse gases, uh, how to save the environment and how to reduce the climate change. This is all about there are all points are discussed in this Doha climate change conference. There are three issues or uh, equity, technology related IPRs, and unilateral measures raised by India found to be this year. So India has having these three issues raised the first of regarding three issues of equity technology because all country or India do not have sufficient type or sufficient funding and technology that can be given by the developed country. So all countries are interrelated or all countries should be collaborated in the to work in the to sign to work to combat the climate change. So at Doha, India also ensured that no hasty decision has been taken and related to the mitigations of the agriculture sector and global level. And agriculture is sensitive sector for the developing country because some decisions are made and developed countries are made in against the agricultural practices because we are also a developing country, we cannot stop using fertilizer and pesticide in order to change the climate. So we are using, but in a sustainable way and in a regulated way. So that's why India does not have agree with the decision that, regarding these agriculture practices because developing country, we are in agricultural country because most of the people are farmer in our India. So we cannot stop to use this type of thing. So other thing, or we are agreed, and this climate change in Doha conference has become successful. No specific target for mid-term financing also adopted. That means in 13 to 20 there is no TAR and no financing thing, and we are only working in the working for the nations or working for the climate change and working for the environment. So while the conferences stopped support or giving a mandate to International Civil Aviation Organization, the ICAO, or International Maritime Organization, to initiate steps for curbing emissions of the respective sector. And the absence of a decision on the sectoral framework for such action has left open possibilities such as action being initiated in such a sector by respective international organizations. So there are different organizations and they are also taking some decision. They are also having some sectors. They are having some frameworks, the possibility to such have been initiated, and this is the different sector and initiated by this organization that have to be implemented in different nations. So this conference is having a successful outcome. Again, another thing on the positive side, participant Doha conferences succeed carrying the agreement on the Kyoto Protocol and ensure a second commitment period. That means whenever when the people or the country does not obey the rule of this due to some constraints such as developing countries, due to the lack of finances and technology, they give is some rule or so they give some extent to obey this type of commitment and adjust to the environment. So second commitment, because second commitment, and the period for a last period of 8 years, that is 1 January 2030. And the decision ensures that there will be no gap between first commitment and second commitment. Because first commitment is the country which are obeyed by this developed country, and second commitment are the commitment which are adopted by the developing countries. Because there are some constraints we are not going to be adopted directly. So after some time, when we are sufficiently enabled or for our capacity building is sufficient so that we can adopt these type of things or adopt to these climate change conferences outcomes. And the European Union also reduced the emission by 20% by 2020 compared to the 90. So 1990 to 2020 in the 30 years, they are reduced the carbon dioxide emission 20%. It is a very great outcome because due to this outcome, we have to reduce reduce the carbon footprint, that is 20%. It's a great thing. So like that, we are going to increase our effort to reduce the carbon dioxide emission, which can be reduce the global warming and climate change, obviously. So government will also agree to seriously work under the development point, developing point, and develop a new set of arrangement and mitigation commitment and action applicable to all countries from the 2020 and adopted by 2015. Because 2015, when we are working on the sustainable development goal, the all of country, irrespective of all nations and positions, they should be obey, because sustainable development can be achieved globally, not individual country. So this is very much important outcome that we have conferences. Then G20. Next discussion is under the G20. So G20 is the group of 20 major economies of the world to the agenda to inclusive green growth during Mexican presidency event. That means 20 most major economy that have under come forward to work about this environment and climate change. It's called G20, and the aim of the introducing this green growth into the G20 agenda was support the transition on developing country, in particular low income countries, towards becoming the low carbon economies, as well as to enable country to become more resilient and climate change. Because 20 developed countries, they are going to support all developing country and developing underdeveloped country or low income country, because they are not going to in a phase to adopt all these climate change policies, because they have some restriction, they do not have some finance and do not have some capacity for this support of this thing. So the developing country, 20 developing countries, they are going to support all these things. So leaders of the G20 last year also collaborated in the climate finance study group, and effectively utilizing the resources. That means every year, 1 year or 2 years, they are sitting in a different assembly or different country to discuss what is the progress and what is and discussing agenda of the future thing. So India will also convey G20 leaders and summit in the first time in 23. This year, India will going to be going to be host G20 summit in 2023, and 43 leaders or delegates of the longest ever G20 will participate in the New Delhi, that is held in 10th September 2023. Recently, India has organized the G20 summit, and everywhere we are going to campaign. Our Prime Minister Narendra Modi also advertise so much as what is G20 and what is about details about the climate, importance of the climate, importance of the environment. So all common people, all officials, all literate people, that also know why we are going to be held or host the G20 summit. Because India is a developing country and it will now going to develop its GDP 4.5 to 6.5. So it can also, with the help of the developed country, so it is very much important in order to combat the climate change. So India is hosting this first time in 2023. Thus, although the G20 is referred to as a group, there are different participants or disciplinary of the ground between the members are in terms of incomes, stages, development, as well as per capita CO2. That is happening always, because developed countries, see this graph, developed countries having higher amount of per capita emission, because they are having utilized more energy per capita as compared to developing country or developed country. So India is the last year. India is the last number. They are reduce. They are using low per capita emissions, because India having large population and we are developing in developing states. We cannot use so much energy as other developing countries, developed country, only developed country. So all countries should not be, cannot be, all country cannot be measured or cannot be obey those rules or for the G20 summit. So India can be hosting this year, and this can be spread universally. So the restrictions are in terms of income, maybe stage of development, which stage we are having developing or develop underdeveloped, or how much we can have to go to progress, and per capita CO2. That means how, what is the population of the total country, and what is the energy they are using and how much CO2 can be released per capita. So this is the different factors which can affect for the G20 summit. So all countries, the USA, Australia, Canada, Saudi Arabia, Russia, Germany, Japan, all these things are developed countries and they have huge resources, huge that means in energy they are utilizing per capita energy is very much high as compared to India because they are already developed, the technology developed, and they are having adequate finance to utilize the thing. So India is become last, not the last, but here some other countries are also they are lower than India, like Somalia, Malia, all these things, Indonesia. So India is in a developing stage and we are also contribute to combat the climate change. So next is financing the climate change. This is very much important because without finance, without a budget of allocation, we cannot combat the climate or cannot progress the actions that we needed to change or in order to taking decisions. And so financing is the most important part of this climate change or climate. So the idea of global budget for carbon and its corresponding finance system from the objective of stabilizing the greenhouse gases consumed the atmosphere and only a small and fast closing window opportunity exists in international community to take action to stabilize the global environment. That means very much low time is available to very much because it is a long process and it requires lots of budget to finance to complete these different tasks in order to achieve the target. So UNFCCA also 2007 they estimated the requirement of $200 billion, that $210 billion additional annual investment required up to 2030 to return the greenhouse gas emission in current level. That means now the what is the level of greenhouse gases in 2030 as we are increasing the greenhouse gases and our emissions are to be double triple, so we can return this or we can be reduce the greenhouse gases in order to achieve the global climate change action goal. So there is a need of huge amount of budget is required. Further additional investment also needed, and that is annually 60 to 180 to $2 billion of 2030. A huge amount of money should be needed for budgeting to take different technologies, including purchasing, to spread awareness, to take the different actions regarding climate change. So the passage of the time, inadequate action, these estimators are being revised and upwards. So this is not fixed. So according time to time, there should be revised. This budget should be revised. This greenhouse gases emissions should be revised. All these things are time to time differs. And some domestic resources and mechanisms are also there. So most obvious resources financing climate changes is the government based support. So no one can be support without government help. So government is the major body to support this mechanism domestically. Because most of it would from sectoral financial level and adequate allocate resources different budget amount to different sections in the annual budget report. So these themes can be adopted by most of the countries who are uh, part of this United Nations program to combat the climate change. So in 2010-11 also they found a different funding agency are formed on that is called National Clean Energy Fund (NCFF). They also out of a sales of 50 ton per coal that invest entrepreneurial venture to research in the field of clean energy technology. That means those who are using coal 50, RS50 means if you are using 100 ton of coal, you are giving extra 50 rupees for the additional R&D sector which can be utilized in the field of clean energy or clean technology by this separate body. So this sales will be imposed in order to gather some fund to research about this research about this sustainable green technology, and we should move forward the non-renewable resources to renewable resources like solar energy, wind energy, and electricity, again hydroelectricity. So these are different funding resources we can or the government can be imposed to the different nations, and that can be used to R&D sector for this and this combat the climate change or to come action with this climate change goal. So recycling, relying solely the carbon taxes subsidiary may not be the most valuable policy. But this is not a valuable policy because this amount, a small amount, cannot be utilized or cannot be in a proper way because we are developing country. We cannot use or cannot allocate a huge amount of budget for this. So for solving this problem, the developing country should be helped and they should allocate huge amount of budget to the developed country in order to take the action of the climate change. So India is also experimenting with a careful mix because India is also developing state. So it neither be denying or neither be having 100% capacity is healthy. So this is a mixed level of budgetary situation in India. So India are also taking part actively in this climate change. So this is the different expenditure that come in different in India, that the environmental permitting subsidiary like a different right side of this is written as sewage and sanitation we use 1236 crore, soil and water conservation we use 26.6 crore. The budget allocate for expenditure in the field of this sustainable development, and fisheries 21.52 crores, forestry and wildlife 9696.36 crores, agricultural research and education 365 crores, and special area developing programming we are using 1560 crores. For flood national control only 175 crore, non-conventional energy over 77 crore, ecology and environment for 73 crore. So total 5,231 crore this will be allocated at the end of the January. This is the budgetary of the discussed in 2008 and 9 allocated, and this is mainly a old data, but nowadays we need more amount of money towards this sustainable development program or towards funding this type of climate change action. And so this is very much necessary to raise a fund and raise a fund and that can be utilized in several ways for this environmental sustainable ways and to combat the climate change and reduces the greenhouse gas emission. So greenhouse gas emission are actually the major cause of the climate change and green what is global warming. So it is necessary to work on that. So international sources and issue primarily it is own concern that India has chucked out ambitious plans and policy to tackle climate change. Environmental issue that reflects strong to address the global public good. That means India is very much fond to rectify the issue and to work on the issue and to tackle the climate change in its own ways. So different states, different countries, and different situations they are going to involve their level of involvement in the climate change compared to climate change. Its level sustainable development is different. So India has a mixed type of category, but because it is a developing country and the population of India is large, so we cannot use large amount of budget. And but we also should not deny to use the budget. So we have to using the budget wisely, and that can be very much helpful to this goal uh, that is Agenda 2030, that is sustainable development for the climate action. However, this is given scarcity of resources, competing demands of finding and matching resources is a very much challenges issue. So financial motivations, outcome to how also we are implementing step by step. So India is a mixed state. We are participating in all these things, and we are also utilizing our fund. We are utilizing the amount we are sanctions. That means that is utilizing toward the climate actions and in different way. And also the different funding agency of developing country also contribute some amount of budget to different countries which having do not are compatible, do not able to finance its own. So there are different categories are there according to a different level. Uh, all are working unitedly in order to combat the climate change or working in about the sustainable environment, because environment is the importance of the environment is understood by every country, and the people should aware what is the major importance and how we can sustain the environment for our future generation. So this is very much. There are different international resources also provided for the work of organizing and the greenhouse commission that is progress. The greenhouse commission that is expected to be instrumental challenging of significant 100 crores billions 100 US billions US dollar annually to be mobilized in developing country. And I already discussed that the developed countries they are also sanctioned different amount of fund according to the its ability in order to addressing this climate change issue. Meanwhile, different funds are under UNFCCC also contribute to different funds to collect different funds to contribute this addressing the climate change. So special climate change fund is one of them, least developed countries fund are one of them, and adaptation fund. So there are three different heads. The funds are they are arranging and they are utilizing the fund towards this addressing the climate change issue. So, in spite of all challenges, we have also have, in spite of funded resource, all the things we know, all the things, but there are various challenges are there which should be addressed, uh, and these should be addressed differently with a different country, and the sustainable outlook also needed, and the challenges are addressed by the countries separately. So we have to look on this matter also. There are different challenges and outlook for sustainable development and the climate change. So the multilateral effect and sustainable development and climate change have led to several positive outcomes. There will be still area of concern where we have to look further work is needed to safeguard the interest of developing countries in future deliberation. That means in spite of the positive outcome, we are spending so much money, so much budget, spending so much, allocate so much budget, but some restrictions are there, some challenges are there because all developing countries and all the country, all nations will not go with their building capacity and to adapt all these changes. So these are the different concerns are there. So we need more further. We cannot stop here. We are continuously improving and continuously working in this area. So this is very much necessary to understand the concern of the developing country or underdeveloped country, and that issues can be solved by me joint venture of this developed country by allocating special fund to them and to know the importance of this climate change or climate action. This is very much necessary. So some of the challenges of India, in the India point of view, let's look some challenges are follow up and action and Rio 20 outcome document. So all documents they are signed by India in 2020 summit that are the cannot be a follow up because there are some points or we are do not compromise our development in the terms of it. So the four processes mechanism of it. That means the future processes mechanism that we are cannot adopt because we are in a developing stage. And all the developed countries who adopt because they are in a growing stage, they are in a growth, they are already grown up, or they are already developed. So especially on developing sustainable development goals and the processes of the financing strategy or technology is transfer that is very much needed because we do not have such type of technology, so we need transfer of technology and transfer of different budget allocations are needed. So there are these type of restrictions are there, and the restrictions can be overcome by the joint venture of all developing countries and the World Bank or funding agency, and by the technology transfer, all these. So also taking forward to climate change discussion in Doha, the key question to address are adequately equity involved arrangement, and that will be applicable in the past 2020 years. That means majority of the concerns are addressed, but some of the concerns are should not be addressed by this developing country due to this type of restriction. So in future, in the next coming days, we should be or the developed countries should be participate and cooperate all these things in order to combat the climate change and the greenhouse gases, reduce the greenhouse gases emission. Because this is the greenhouse gases are the major problems that is for climate change and the greenhouse Like mainly carbon dioxide and methane and chlorofluorocarbon. These are the things we cannot stop because we have some restrictions are there. So the developed country are going to help that, and by joint venture we can also come out with the. So based on history, commission and responsibility, we see some there are boundaries are there, different countries are there, they are working on this. So developed countries should take the lead. Obviously, who are developed country, they are simultaneously taking the lead in order to take responsibility to funding some agencies as well as funding different or technology transfer, all these things. However, according to June 2011 study by the Stockholm Environment Institute, the comparison of Annex 1 and non-Annex 1 please under the Canon Agreement, developing countries are placing greater costs in their greenhouse gas emission than developed countries. So it is going to observe that by the Stockholm Environmental Institute, they are stating that the developing countries are, in spite of their developing, they are cutting the greenhouse emission in greater extent as compared to developed countries. Because developed countries, they are already developed and they are in the stage of not to compromise. So they have, but developing country are compromise these things and they are in or reduces the greenhouse emission by obeying these things. So this is very much good thing because all countries should not be obey this type of reduction or greenhouse gas emission. India is also proactive in this regard, or India also cut down very much greenhouse gas emissions since last decades. And in spite of this interaction and ambitions, family in place policies and programs. So there are different policies, programs are there. In spite of all the things, India cut down its greenhouse gas emissions very wisely manner. So India is the right track for the cutting the greenhouse gas emission and towards this responsibility is the responsible. India is very much responsible to taking actions regarding climate change, combat the climate change. So there is very much necessary to take this right track. Which country is right track or not? First, only one country is right track and other country are not. Then this is not going to help the globally. So India is actually having its correct way to enabling the environment, protect the environment by cutting the other greenhouse gases in a huge way. So significant manners. So has a number of achievements and the credit. However, the challenges why India is growing, identify the key drivers and enable the growth. And there are infrastructure, transportation sector, housing, and other agriculture practices that makes this sector grow sustainability. Means we are working all these fields like infrastructure, transportation, housing, agriculture. India is the agriculture. Mostly India's are the depend on the farming or agriculture. So agriculture we are cannot cut down so much greenhouse gases because methane is produced due to agricultural fact. So we cannot stop agriculture because it is a we are depend on agriculture. So what sector we are going to cut down that is depend on country by country. So this is the main thing we are focusing in which way we can reduce this greenhouse gas emission, and this will be not achieved by the only government rule and policy. This should be understand every citizen of the India, every citizen of the country, nation, so that they can make small contribution to cut down these greenhouse gases and take necessary actions regarding the climate change. And this is very much good for India that we are significantly reduce the carbon dioxide emission in some last decade. But we cannot, obviously, we cannot stop to emit. But as compared to the other countries, we are just comparing. As compared to developed countries, we have significantly reduced the greenhouse gas emission. Because there are some constraints are there. In spite of this constraint, we are progressing well. So India could go much a new few additional finance technology and made available through multiple process. Although India does not have sufficient amount of technology, India needs this technology transfer further from developing country in order to progress more and more. So this is very much necessary. The developed country role responsibility is to transfer the technology, funding the budget to country like India, which is developing stage, they are reducing greenhouse emission. So it should be think of all countries that we have to reduce the carbon footprint. We have to reduce our pollution level. So this should be the mindset of all countries, and that is observed and monitored by the green, monitored by this developed country. So we can slowly progress toward this sustainable environment and sustainable development. So being a national or global, environment decline, obviously either it is a national or global thing, environment is worldwide same, because uh, environment is cannot go, it is beyond the barrier of territory of the different nations and countries, because atmosphere, water, it is freely moving and freely available everywhere. So it does not obey the territory rule. So all countries should, in spite of all conflict, they come in front of and they should be tackle this issue simultaneously or jointly. So global warming occurs gradually, decades and centuries. Speaking of this space and time, obviously today the global warming is the major concern, and in spite of all this action, either national or global, it is going and keeping going and going on. So we must remember that clock is now ticking and need to taking global action to combat this climate change. Otherwise, one day come where we cannot control these things. Control these things. It is the now it is the stage we can control this or combat this action by taking suitable action and by our setting that mindset that we have to develop the sustainability and sustainable development as well as sustainable environment for our future generation. So this is the time. If you lose the time, the clock or the time never waits anyone. So in future, we should realize that yes, we have the time and we have not utilized that time wisely. So at that point, you have no time to recover that thing. So this is the time we should think. We should mean all country, all nations should think what is the necessary things that will be done by today that can be helped in our future generation. So this exam should be very fair and just equitable to all countries, so that future will get a peaceful life, wealthyful life, and a standard life that does not compromise anything like us. So for our future generation, environment is most necessary, ecology is necessary, and the ecosystem restoration is necessary. So all economic as well as environmental growth, we are making a social impact, and that is achieve the sustainable development for all by making all joint ventures, in spite of national global, in spite of all conflict, in spite of all hate. We should come forward and work in a together venture. This is very much necessary. Let's start with the documentary that will explain all the necessary things. So let's see, watch it.
All life on Earth, from ecosystems to human civilization, is vulnerable to a changing climate. Scientific evidence now shows that the current human-caused global warming of 1.1 degrees Celsius is increasingly impacting nature and people's lives everywhere, despite efforts to adapt to the changing climate. More frequent and severe climate extreme events, such as heat waves over land and in the ocean, droughts and flooding, have caused widespread and pervasive impacts to ecosystems, people, cities and infrastructure, and limit the chances of a livable future for all. There is new knowledge that human-induced climate change caused these destructive impacts or makes them more likely.
This report is important because I think it really underscores the fact that the scientific evidence is now unequivocal. It's clear that climate change is impacting on the well-being of human societies, but also on the well-being of our planet. This report really brings us a new message, though, that those two things are not separate, that there's a very intimate relationship between our well-being, the well-being of our planet, and the forces that are driving climate change and the resulting impacts and responses that we may have to that challenge.
Since the last assessment report, the scientific evidence has increased and emphasized, based on observations of impacts, how the ecosystems and human society are changing under the influence of climate change. We see the losses and damages, and on both sides we have specific examples that indicate the underpinning mechanisms, and we are learning from that also for our projections as global warming is proceeding, what to expect for the future and what the future losses and damages will be if climate change cannot be stopped.
The extent and magnitude of climate change impacts are larger for each additional fraction of warming than estimated in previous assessments. So are the risks projected for the future. The impacts involve severe and widespread disruptions to nature and to society, reducing our ability to grow nutritious food or provide clean drinking water.
The poorest communities are the ones that are strongest hit by climate change, as they're least able to cope with the growing impacts. Our assessment indicates that there are between 3.3 and 3.6 billion people who live in such hotspots. These are spread across parts of Africa, South Asia, South and Central America, small islands, and the Arctic. Climate change acts like a stress multiplier in these regions, where people have limited access to clean drinking water, to sanitation, to health facilities or education. The livelihoods of people are also strongly dependent on climate-sensitive activities such as farming and fishing. They have limited access to funding, limited accountability from governments, and limited trust, therefore, in governments. Climate impacts are also felt differentially by men and women, as they have different roles and responsibilities in society.
This report shows that climate change is impacting every ecosystem across the globe, from high mountain ecosystems to the deep ocean, from tropical coral reefs all the way to Arctic ice-driven ecosystems. We see the fingerprint of climate change across all of these systems. One of the other things that the report really shows is that extreme events are increasing and their effects are rapidly changing ecosystems across the globe. So marine heat waves on land, storm events, these are driving changes to the ecosystems and species that we rely on. This is pushing species towards polar regions, it's pushing species to higher, cooler altitudes or down into the deeper, cool waters. And because of that, it has cascading impacts across ecosystems, but also people's livelihoods and societies that depend on the services that these ecosystems provide. And as we approach the limits of what species and ecosystems can tolerate, we risk crossing what we call tipping points, these critical places in the system where returning to previous conditions where recovery is less possible.
Climate change impacts are magnified in cities, where more than half of the world's population lives today. Heat waves amplify urban heat islands and air pollution in cities that affect people's health. Critical infrastructure within settlements, such as transportation, water, sanitation, and energy systems, have been compromised by extreme weather events. Cities and settlements by the sea are specifically impacted by climate hazards. They are at the front line of climate change, being directly exposed to interacting climate and non-climate coastal hazards, such as sea level rise and destruction of local ecosystems that previously protected people living along the coast.
Multiple climate hazards are also occurring simultaneously, with often cascading impacts. These impacts are becoming increasingly complex and challenging to manage. How these will affect nature and people depends on the speed and level of warming and how we adapt.
The Working Group 2 report of the IPCC shows that the impact of climate change is worsened by destruction of habitats, also unsustainable use of natural resources, deforestation, and growing urbanization and population growth trends. The report also found that for the African region, increasing urbanization is an important compounding factor for climate change. For the coastal areas of Africa, especially the low-lying coastal areas, population is increasing rapidly because of the economic opportunities that the coastal environment presents. Many people moving into the coastal areas live in informal settlements, marginal areas, and high-risk areas. And this has implications because the threats of climate change is compounded, and the ecosystems and the people that rely on them are affected.
El reporte muestra que tenemos acciones de adaptación importantes en diferentes partes del planeta, pero los avances no son similares en diferentes regiones y de hecho no estamos haciendo suficientes esfuerzos para alcanzar los niveles de adaptación necesitados por los niveles actuales de calentamiento. Eso resulta en vacíos de adaptación importantes, especialmente en regiones de bajos ingresos como mi propio país, Guatemala, donde vemos barreras importantes que vienen no solamente de aspectos financieros, sino también de aspectos institucionales. La buena noticia es que sí tenemos acciones de adaptación que podemos hacer para reducir nuestros niveles de vulnerabilidad, pero la efectividad de estas acciones dependerá de los niveles de calentamiento. Por lo tanto, tenemos que tener tanto adaptación como mitigación trabajando mano a mano.
We also have evidence of what's called maladaptation. These are adaptation actions that result in unintended consequences. For example, coastal ecosystems that are destroyed through the construction of dikes and seawalls, or climate-related risks that are transferred to other regions or groups in society. Even greenhouse gas emissions can be increased through maladaptation. Our report shows that Indigenous peoples, ethnic minorities and disadvantaged groups, such as low-income households and those living in informal settlements, are some of the most affected by maladaptation. Unfortunately, this reinforces and entrenches already existing inequalities.
The report shows that nature offers significant yet untapped potential to reduce climate risks, to deal with the causes of climate change, and to improve people's lives and livelihoods. However, nature needs space and protection to be able to provide those services.
By protecting and restoring 30 to 50% of our world's ecosystems on land and in the ocean, we help plants and animals build climate resilience. Nature, in turn, can help us regulate the climate, give us clean water, control pests and diseases, pollinate our crops, and provide nutritious food. Cities also provide a global opportunity to advance adaptation, mitigation, and sustainable development simultaneously. Using different adaptation strategies, such as nature-based and engineering approaches together, or providing social safety nets, can generate wider benefits for health, food security, and ecosystems. However, investing in nature and cities alone isn't enough. To secure a healthy, livable planet for everyone, we need to transform our way of life fundamentally. Taking action now gives us the best chance of success.
Where this report is different is that it puts humankind into context and emphasizes that we cannot abandon this context, because it emphasizes the relationship between three systems: climate, human society, and biodiversity, and indicates how these systems influence each other. Human society causes climate change, it causes biodiversity loss, and these interactions that are underpinning this are also the source of the solutions. With modifying these interactions, we can move into a sustainability space.
So I think one of the important advancements is not only talking about risk, but looking at the solutions that we have available to respond to that risk. But a list of solutions is not adequate. What we need to be able to do is determine the feasibility and effectiveness of those solutions and how they might be drawn into practice. And so it really gives practitioners guidelines about where is the best place to act. We've got very clear pointers, for example, to the protection of ecosystems and activities in cities as ways that we might be able to change the world.
The science is clear. Any delay in concerted global climate action means missing a brief and rapidly closing window to secure a livable future.
This report is a dire warning about the consequences of inaction. It shows that climate change is a grave and mounting threat to our well-being and a healthy planet. Our actions today will shape how people adapt to climate change and how nature responds to increasing climate risks. It recognizes the interdependence of climate, biodiversity, people, and it integrates natural, social, and economic sciences more strongly than earlier IPCC assessments. It emphasizes the urgency of immediate and more ambitious action to address climate risks. Half measures are no longer an option.
IPCC reports provide the most up-to-date science related to climate change for policymakers to inform their decisions on developing climate-related policies. Hundreds of scientists worldwide have volunteered their time and expertise to produce this report. IPCC reports go through an extensive review process by experts and government to achieve the highest quality. This process makes them policy relevant and policy neutral.
So this is all about climate change related to sustainable development. So it is necessary to take some actions, and that actions can be taken all together by all nations throughout, irrespective of all these conflicts, because this is the main goal or main
Okay.